Welcome to Hope for Survival YouTube. Thanks for joining in. Today, Festus and I have a special guest again. Chaplain Tracy Elder we have worked out schedules to get back together again to continue our discussion from two previous podcasts. And today we're going to talk about the broken system. Chaplain Elder, welcome back to Hope for Survival YouTube. Festus and I are happy to have you.
Well, thank you for having me again. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm here.
Understand. Totally understand. Festus, you doing all right?
Doing great.
Good. Chaplain Elder, tell us in your words, describe what you mean by the broken system. We talked about the broken church, and now we're talking about the broken system. Describe the broken system for our viewers.
I think as we sit here today, I think every American has a great view of our broken system right now. There's multiple things going on. We have Chinese balloons going across, and we have all these other little things going on. Things are falling out of the sky. We're setting train wrecks on fire. We are, there's all these different kind of things that are going on all over the place, and none of them seem to be well managed.
Yeah. At
this point. And again, before in our history, we would be looking at it going, I can't remember a day when everything felt this incompetent or this unreal, or it's like what am I in some kind of a dystopian movie
yeah.
where everything is broken down to the point where there's like no real leadership going on, because we would have never seen the things happening the way that they're happening right now, with such it almost feels like decline. It's like nobody really, who's really in charge, and there really doesn't feel like there's a system that is trustworthy or overseeing that like it used to be, where you actually felt like there was some protection for us.
Yes.
This happens, you have this happening, and that doesn't feel like this anymore. It doesn't feel like that system is in place at all anymore. And so we're fractured and factioned. As a nation, even as Christians, we're fractured and factioned, and we become more and more contentious. There is no unity of thought, because the recent political environment has caused everybody to mistrust everybody. And it's a fact that when President Obama was in office, one of the things he said was, if your neighbors are saying something this way, let us know. So that became part of the norm. That became part of it, where all of a sudden now we're reporting on one another. We are no longer safe to speak the truth and have freedom of speech. Even religious speech is being looked at. We've weaponized the FBI and other agencies within the government against the American people. Yes, and against the American people. Right now, the latest report coming out of the FBI that there was a leaked memo that they were going after the Catholics
as
white supremacists and this and this and this and this and this, those who speak Latin and do Latin services. So these things are only making sense to people who have a specific agenda moving forward. Most people are confused by it, because most rational people who are sitting down, living their lives, going to work, doing their thing, taking care of their families, taking care of business, are assaulted every other day with a new something. So the next one is going to be the 87,000 IRS agents against you, or the new tax thing on waitresses, or do you get what I'm saying? All these things are happening, and it feels like an assault on the citizens of the United States. And we all know it's not supposed to be that way. But the more that this happens, the more that they keep everybody in that disconnected and confused and discounted state, the less likely they are to step back and be rational and say, okay, wait a minute, what's really going on?
Yeah, I think you hit
This
the
doesn't
key
seem
word,
right. Doesn't
rational.
feel right. It's not, yeah, it's not rational. Nothing looks rational. But and most of it is to evoke an emotional response. And when people are emotional, they're not rational. So if we can keep everybody in an emotional response by throwing out every surprise every other day, and everybody gets an opinion, and it's an emotional opinion rather than actual sitting down and analyzing and saying, okay, let's step back here and take a look at this. What's really going on? Why would somebody do that? Asking those other questions. But what we're doing is we're all emoting, we're all reacting to it rather than looking at it and saying, okay, what should our response be?
Yeah.
Do we need to get together as a community and say, okay, these things are being thrust upon us against our will, so there are powers that be that are trying to go for an agenda. We get we get to choose a response, and what's our response going to be? Our response should be, we need to prepare. We need to prepare, because I can't do anything about a China balloon going over our nation and watching our government disregard that as if it's nothing. And our own president goes on TV and says it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't really a breach. So to me, as an American citizen, I'm thinking, now wait a minute. In my experience, that is a big breach. You know what I'm saying? That's a huge breach. Somebody invaded our airspace at the right altitude that could cause a whole lot of problems if they had something on there of nefarious nature. And we tracked it, and we didn't tell anybody until, you know what I'm saying, until somebody actually said something. So those create mistrust in what people are telling us. So right now there's a huge mistrust for the government. There's a huge mistrust for citizens in general, because who can you trust now? Because if you say the wrong thing, are you going to be doxxed? Are you going to be, are you going to be outed? Is the FBI going to come to your door now? Because now, if you're a Catholic attending a Latin mass and you're a white male, you could be labeled as a white supremacist just for being Catholic and a white male. So, so these are creating different things. So what's happened is that they're trying to, I believe that the forces are trying to get people into controllable, smaller, bite-sized groups, if you understand what I'm saying.
6 feet
Yes,
apart.
to try to, yes, 6 feet apart, yes. But I'm just saying that most people, and again, if you go with any of the studies that the government themselves have done over the last 100 years, and I'm using that as a facetious number, but even back in the 1960s, going back to some of the studies that they did that showed that basically 63% of the people, if a doctor or somebody in authority stands in front of them and tells them that they must do something, even if it harms another person, those 63% will continue to do it because of the authority that the other person has,
Yeah.
even though they themselves have a hard time morally dealing with the pain they're causing another person. Where the other 36% or 26%, 30% are saying, oh, no way. And so what's happening is that the 60 some percent are already in lockstep. They're already compliant. They're already that way. So I believe that they are trying to, it's like throwing dynamite in the water, trying to get, and see what surfaces. And I think the dynamite in the water, seeing what surfaces, causes those other 30% who are non-compliant, who are free thinking and saying, oh no, I'm not, I want to know why we're marching, but why? I'm not saying I'm unwilling to march. I just want to know why and where we're going with this. And then I'll make a decision as to whether I'm going to march with you or not. That's not the norm.
Well,
Most people.
There used to be when you go through the founding of our country and the founding documents and our forefathers and through history and recent history, somewhere along the line, the train derailed, if you will.
Yes.
There is no longer a system of accountability. And, there was, elections have consequences. Yeah, but now if you say election has consequences and you point out specific elections, then you're a denier, and you go into
Yes.
that you're a bad boy box
Right.
for all the other
So
things. So I guess the bottom line, somewhere along the line, those who work for us that we're paying their bill are now telling us to keep
Yes.
paying for us, but shut up because you no longer can have an opinion.
Shut
And
up and get in
until
line.
that is
Right.
clipped and they are
Yes.
put back in the box of, no,
Yes.
you're accountable to us and you work for us.
Right.
We just have to
Right.
find
And
that
something,
accountability
right. Something
process.
happened in the American psyche
Yes.
that said that the government, and again, it comes down to the two different philosophies of the two different parties. One is for bigger government and government control. One is for states' rights and citizen control. So that's a basic difference in the two parties. And whenever you start to look at it, we were formed as a republic,
Yes.
which means states rule, citizens rule, the government works for us. That mindset has slowly been eroded over the years because of teaching in our schools, and now we know what's been being taught in our schools, especially in the last 30 years. Again, it's been Marxist teachings over the last 30 years rather than the teaching that we got as kids that were it's very different. It's indoctrination now rather than
Yeah.
fact and history and a historical perspective. And they're being taught and they're being raised in litters and taught groupthink rather than being an individual and thinking for themselves. So like I'm talking about the dynamite in the water, they're looking for that 30% that won't comply. And what they're trying to do is again, that 30% are always going to be problematic. So what will happen is it's easier for them to get the 60% into the cities, which again, if you go to Davos and you go
Yeah.
to the whole fourth industrial revolution and all of that stuff going on,
Yeah.
all of that is designed to do that. And when you hear Klaus Schwab talking about wearables and things like that, that's the precursor to implants and all those other kind of things. That's where they're actually going. Now, that used to be science fiction
Oh
back
yeah.
in our day.
Oh
But
yeah.
what people didn't realize is that was actually happening way back before Hitler.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? All the eugenics and all the other stuff. And again, that it's the same old stuff being recycled because there's only one. There's there's only one way to do this, and it's to get the people to lose their self will and their self rule,
Yeah. So
and
self.
to give over their will to something else or to someone else, and that's what that's all about. And doesn't that sound very interesting? Like maybe the very beginning of creation, if you're a person of faith, we gave our self will and our self rule over to something else,
Yeah.
something foreign, and we lost a lot in that fall. Whereas if we had continued to walk with our Creator and walked with His ways, we would be talking about the things we're talking about now. But the broken system began then, and the fact of the matter is that there is no and government right now. If we believe if people of faith believe what they believe, then they need to start taking a look at what's my role. If this is happening and it looks like it's happening this way, and we believe what the Bible says, then what's my role right now? Okay, so we've forgotten who we are that way. We talked about the broken church, but the fact of the matter is that the longer that we hold up in our ivory towers with groupthink and say, we're okay here in this place, when we're not okay anywhere except for the fact that God is watching over us and God is with us wherever we are. This certain place and this certain mindset of, we believe this, so we're the right ones. And I'm sorry that you believe something else and you're not the right one. So it's the fractured and faction nature of it keeps us from being effective as His people. How are we expecting the schools and the government and everything else to be fixed if we are absent from it? How are we expecting our communities to be ready for whatever's coming if we ourselves aren't preparing? Where's the example? Where's the leadership among the churches anymore? Because there's no leadership in government. Right now, the government has been weaponized against its people,
Yeah.
and again, that was inevitable. It's happened in every history, every nation, every continent, everywhere since the beginning of time. There have been rises and falls of civilizations that are not even heard of ever again. They rose and they fell over these same issues, and these same issues are about power and control.
Agreed.
And they're about who are you going to serve?
Yeah.
And it's always going to come down to that. My government is not here for me to serve my government. My government is here to serve me in America. That message has been lost. It's been lost. It's been diluted. And because people don't understand the power that they have, they're losing it incrementally and exponentially. So the 30% who are holding on to that are viewed as enemies of the state, if you will. Because again, who are they going after? Who is the FBI weaponized against?
Not
Average
the ones
working class
dependent on the
people.
system.
Yes, exactly that too. But the fact of the matter is that those who are on the government dole, they don't have to worry about.
Correct.
They don't have to worry about them. They're I'm saying they receive their whatever from them, and so they've got that. They're not worried about that. They are worried about the ones that they can't get in line. And so, just as history reveals, every generation has their enemy to fight. Every generation has a group of people who will not comply with irrational, unfettered power against it. You know what I'm saying? There will always be those people who will say, you've gone too far, and I'm not going with you, and I'm not, I'm going to actually fight against you a little bit here by not complying. And that's some of the ways that you can fight back, is just don't comply with certain things. And certain things are, I'm gonna homeschool my kids. You know what I'm saying? That's one way I can fight back, because
But
I'm
it's
not
your
going to have them
choice.
indoctrinated.
But
Yeah, it's a choice. And it doesn't matter whether or not I have to pay for that or not. I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure that so that's one way of fighting back. It's not all. We're not talking about overthrowing anybody. We're not talking about overthrowing the government. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about in your individual everyday life that you have control over, that you have the ability to choose in. Start making those choices that are best for you, your family, and your community. And if we're not preparing and we're not even thinking through those choices, because we're in such desperate straits, because if I'm worried about my finances, I'm worried about my health, and I'm worried about all these other things, I cannot focus on the true purpose for which I was created.
Correct.
And what these last few comments, you've really been addressing the 30%.
Uh-huh.
So for the balance, the 60 some percent that you've mentioned earlier, what steps can they do, or how do they get their mojo back? How do they start critical thinking again, developing thicker skin, so that being called names like deniers or whatever, it doesn't affect things anymore?
Right.
How do they get proactive instead of reactive? How do those 60% make that turnaround?
They have to get out of the emotion of it. When somebody called me, I was recently in a big city recently, and I was minding my own business, doing my own thing, and somebody walked past me and called me a colonizer. Oh, the colonizers. And I just have to laugh, because I'm like, I wish I had, a colony. You know what I'm saying? I haven't colonized anything. I've got a mortgage just like everybody else. I'm not into world domination or looking to, try to own anybody or do anything like that. I'm just trying to survive just like everybody else. So it's reverse racism that way too, which is, and again, the thing is that they've gotten people off balance because, oh my gosh, because I'm white, I'm supposed to be, I mean, there were more books coming out about it too, check your white privilege and all this other kind of stuff. And I just happen to not agree with most of the premises of those books. And again, and I believe that from their perspective, they might see the world that way, and probably not without having some validity to some of it. But the fact of the matter is that they broad brushed it. And again, but again, if you understand and you know what's really going on, it is Marxist propaganda. This is exactly the same way it happened back in Russia. Ayn Rand wrote about it in her, when she was talking about it in Atlas Shrugged and everything else. And it started that way. They did the same tactics in China over and over and over again. They all did these types of things to try to bring down a nation and rebuild it into a communist deal. And so this has happened before. But the problem is that our children have been indoctrinated into Marxism, and they've been inoculated against American freedom.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, anything American means bad. Anything American means that you're the stealer of this, you're the murderer of babies, and it's simply not true. Every nation has their stain. Every race has a stain on it. We have all harmed each other. And but the fact of the matter is that what they're trying to do is they're using this to get to a specific place, a specific agenda, a specific way of life. And the fact of the matter is that when we're looking at that, you're talking about the 60%. The 60%, for the most part, are going to comply. How do you get them to see? If they're not seeing it by now, if you can't look around our nation, see the brokenness of the system and everything else, it's rampant, it is blatant, it is absolutely obvious. If they're not going to acknowledge it now, and they're not going to do something about it now, what makes you think that there is a message that will bring them out of it? Because what will happen is there will come a message, and that message will be one to say, here we are to rescue you. Follow us. This is the way. Come into the cities. And that's the only way we can protect you. We can't protect you in the wildlands out there. Come into the cities and you'll have food. Come into the cities. You see, those would be the messages of the Savior. So they're creating the problems
with their solution,
so that they can come with the solutions. Yes, and again, we've seen that before. We've seen it over and over and over again through world history. It's happened the same way. It's no different. And the only difference is that it's global now. It's the first time in history that it's ever been global. That was never possible before. And it's the internet that made that possible. Yeah. And so when we begin to look at it that way, all of our global communication and interconnectedness, people begin to see it as if the whole world is falling apart when that's not the truth. Most people are managing their lives. Most people are, but they're creating crisis in their minds and in the hysteria that they're pushing on people with the everyday crisis, the drip, 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 drip crisis. And the water torture, if you will, and that was very effective. Water torture was to drip, drip, drip on somebody's forehead. And that's what they're using. And again, the 30% that are saying, wait a minute, they already understood that nothing is what it appears to be. They already looked behind the curtain to see what the wizard really was. They already knew that, and they had a healthy dose of skepticism. They're not paranoid. They're not looking to make things crazy or looking for conspiracy theories here and there. They're not making things up. They're just seeing what's happening, analyzing it, and bringing it forth as information. And other people have a reaction, an emotion, a something to it. And so when people have a strong reaction for or against something, that changes the way people deliver the message. And that didn't used to be the way that it was. Before, the news would deliver the message, right, wrong, and bad, and different. They would just deliver the message.
But
and
you decided.
Yeah, and then you could do with it what you wanted. But now,
It's
and the
conditioning.
24-hour news cycle, yeah, and the opinions everywhere. There's less news, less facts, and more opinion on everything. So everybody gets an opinion today, and we're on TikTok and Instagram and everything, and we're giving our opinion because we all want power and control because people feel puny. And that 60%, if they don't see it by now, again, the message that the 30% are sharing isn't strong enough for them because they're looking. They don't want to hear. They don't want to hear the facts, and they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear. This is going to take us time to dig out. It's going to take some work. They want the instant, right now. Give me a solution. Get me out of pain. Um, Deal that's going to give them the least, cost them the least thing, but it will cost them the most in the end. They just don't realize it.
Do you know, 20 or 30 years ago, um, whether you was a Democrat or a Republican, you could go to bed at night and still, even though you didn't agree with direction or some policies, you could go to bed at night and you didn't have to worry that Washington was going to go over a cliff before you woke up.
Right.
Now, and I've even asked myself, it's like, well, is it me because I'm older and I see things from a different perspective now? But it's like, it's worrisome that there's no one driving the bus.
Right.
Everyone behind the driver is telling him, turn here, go there, turn here. Don't look up, look down, and don't look left or right. Just keep going through the stop signs and it's worrisome. It's truly worrisome.
Right. And people, whether we want to admit this or not, we crave structure.
Yeah.
We want things to be solid.
Security.
If I get on the road and I know this is the schedule of this or this or this, and it's not that way, it makes people nervous. And people have a hard time. Yeah, they have a hard time dealing with something outside of the norm. So you also have to understand too, excuse me, we are a nation that just came out of a critical incident and nobody dealt with it. And so
came out of what?
Coming out of a critical incident, which is COVID. So nobody dealt with it and nobody's teaching them how to deal with it. And so in 2023, I read a report when, at the beginning of the year, and it was one of those blurbs on like Google or something like that said that 2023, their New Year's resolution had nothing to do with weight loss or anything like the normal stuff. Their 2023 resolution for this year was mental health, because it's all about wellness right now. Because people nobody got help coming through COVID. After COVID, they came out, and again, we're still not back to normal.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that we're not going to be normal in any time, way, shape, or form soon, unless somebody gets out there and starts doing some mental health work, some critical incidents debriefings and stuff like that with the nurses and doctors and the people who were shut in and all those other people, because we can track it out for you. I work in critical incident stress all the time, and I do debriefings with people of every group that you can imagine, especially first responders. And we know that this process works, and we need a national debriefing for the last since 2001. Since 9/11. And none of us have done that very well. So it's been crisis after crisis after crisis. And you have a specific group of people in a party saying, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
And they take advantage of that. And instead of healing people, they exacerbate the unhealthy habits or the unhealthy thinking, or they prey upon it. And that's a fact. And I'm saying that as a fact. That'll probably get me on a watch list somewhere. But the fact of the matter is that unless we heal the people from what they just went through as a nation, and again, there's no leadership nationally to lead us to healing. If President Trump had gotten a second term, we would have been led to healing. We wouldn't have been in lockdowns as long, maybe. I don't know.
But
I'm just saying that
part of from an American perspective, non-political, in order for President Trump to have led us to healing, he first himself must accept the fact that he is the one that
You need to hear.
supported and ordered the jab,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
vaccine. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but and again, with more
Later,
information, we maybe would have gone in a
yeah.
different direction. But I don't know.
But ask yourself this question: If in the fall of 2019 this was the norm,
Yeah.
and by the summer of 2020 the new norm was either here or here, ever how you want to look at it, right? And now we're in near the spring of 2023, and we've still not gotten back to here, right?
No,
So,
because nobody's led us there. Nobody
so
has given. Yeah.
can we be led there? Is my
Yes.
question, because prior to COVID, um, prior to it occurring, we had a nation in the media pumping the whole separation of races,
Yeah.
separation of faith and
Yeah.
non-faith, socioeconomic, on and on and on. Well, now we have another group. We have those that have and those that have not received the
Yes.
thing,
The job. Yeah.
and we cannot get back to here until that is dealt with. And from the looks of things within the government, with the coding and the medical system and so on and so forth, even you don't have to be, you do not have to be a denier or a supporter. When you look at the overwhelming abundance of information that is coming out now,
Yes.
a logical person, even if you agree or disagree, a logical person would step back and say, hey, you know what? Before I make this decision to go any further, I want to start looking into some of these details and these studies and the analysis that is coming out. Right?
Right.
So,
and here, back to your question, can we be let out of this? Yes. And it's got to start, it's got to start locally with people. If municipalities, if even just local municipalities at a county or a city level put together a strategic plan, excuse me,
the strategic plan.
Yeah.
I hear
Strategic plan to debrief their people and bring them back from COVID using peer support, chaplains, other type of people, mental health people, and started even by groups. So you have teachers that need to be debriefed. You have families that need to be debriefed. You need students from those schools that need to be debriefed. You need healthcare work. Everybody on the planet needs to sit down and take a calm breath and say, okay, we need to deal with what we all just went through, because we were just told, weren't there, beginning in what it was in 2022, where people saying, okay, we were wrong about some things. Let's all just forget about all the crap that we said to each other, and let's just get past it. And let's just, people can't do that. Kumbaya. They need a guided, right. They needed a guided discussion to make that happen. It's the right premise. We all need to have a discussion. We need to take care of that. We need to deal with that so that we can move on. But all of that stuff is still in there, and it's raw, and it's still floating around in people, and it's more divisive than anything, and it continues to divide, which leads to all these other things. All of these things that you're seeing, including the things that you just mentioned, that list of things you just mentioned, are symptoms of stress, critical incident stress. All of them. The way that we divide, the way that we become irritable with one another, the way that we're reacting and responding, those are all signs of critical incident stress. If we were, as a people, to decide we really want to heal from this, and we really want to get past this, and we want to do it healthy, we want to come back and be one people, one nation, one cohesive group again, then that's what it's going to take. It's going to take sit downs, face to face, relational conversations, the right guided conversations to bring people back together again. But barring that, you're going to have all these people saying, don't invite white people to this, don't invite Latinos to that, don't invite don't invite people to the diversity training because we don't want them here.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I just read that it was a headline somewhere. Don't invite white people or Latinos to the diversity training.
Or
And
to
I'm
be
like,
construction workers.
or to be, that's a new one too. But I'm just saying that any thinking, and again, that causes more division when people see that. It causes a reaction, an emotional one that becomes cumulative, because all of that stuff in there is now cumulative. It's all adding up in there because none of it got addressed, none of it was right, none of it was okay, and we're not okay. We are not okay. But we
Critical
can
thinking
be.
is so deficient now.
Yes, but if we, and people aren't able to
Right.
think, they can't hear you when they're in crisis mode all the time. And this government and the way things are going right now, everybody's in crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis, because there doesn't seem to be a grip on anything. And so if we as people decide we really want to stop and heal this and get back to a normal, it's got to start with smaller groups. So it's got to be peer driven. So if I'm in a hospital right now, and most of us are struggling with a hospital worker in some form or fashion, and most of us are struggling with critical incident stress because all these signs and symptoms, we're losing people by attrition, we're seeing divorces, we're seeing suicides, we're seeing people just leave the job, we're seeing them overwhelmed, then I need to look at those symptoms and say, okay, we are suffering. Number one, we're suffering. Number two, how do we, what are we suffering from? And again, the answer is critical incident stress. And so what do you do about critical incident stress? Well, let's find out. A debriefing, a 3-hour conversation can save people's lives. We know it works. We know it's true. We know it works. And if we were employing it right now, large scale, then we would be able to start to get our lives back, get our institutions back, and be able to come back together and cohese, because you heal when you deal. When you dwell, there's hell.
Yeah.
So
well said.
That's the difference. And I'm, and because I'm a healer, because I'm somebody who works in that realm of critical incident stress and first responders and things like that, I know what we're again, I'm counting the years. So we're 3 years in now. Okay. So right now we're going to be seeing, and we started seeing it already, the uptick in suicides. Those will continue. Those are going to continue, and they're going to be on the rise and rise. And again, we could have prevented a lot of that had we as a nation, as we as a people decided we need to do something with this critical incident stress that we're all feeling. But because it went unaddressed, because the mental health people that are supposed to be helping us heal from these kind of things, they are now all dug in on the gender stuff. So that's the distraction. So the mental health field is now in arguments over gender. They're distracted by that whole argument, that whole discussion. Whereas where they should have been focused was, how do we heal people? How do we come in and have these discussions? How do we go to our hospitals and say, let us help you. Let's start debriefing. Let's start doing this.
So at this point, who is the most likely or best candidate type person or group to start pulling people together and start this discussion and debriefing and healing process? Is it you just talked about the mental health professionals, and they're kind of distracted on another topic at this point. Would it really fall back to the local pastors? Would it fall back to some other group, law enforcement, whatever?
I think it's going to take leadership, and I think it's going to take somebody in a community starting to say, we need to do these things. And not everybody's going to listen to it. The churches don't necessarily see a debriefing as something that they really want to look at, because it looks Caesar-ish. Yes. It looks too much like Caesar when we feel that God is enough, and we just need to pray, and we just need to. But again, if that were the only thing that was needed, then Jesus wouldn't have done some of the things he did or said some of the things he said. We need to heal, and again, so it's going to take people in communities bringing the awareness. And so one of the things that we've done here in our own community is we've gone forward and we've talked to some of the local. We've gone to some of the institutions, and we said, here's, we want to offer this. as kind of an EAP thing, chaplains as EAP. Basically, we're saying chaplains can come in and we can do these debriefings. We can even teach your people how to do these debriefings on a regular basis. And we're willing to do that. And it will cost you less in the long run if you use peer
Yeah.
counselors and um, uh, peer support and chaplains than it would be if you tried to do it another way. So peer support is the way to start this, because every group is different and every group needs, and all debriefings are peer driven anyway. So it starts there in peer groups. But most people don't even know what to ask for. They just know that everything feels crazy and everybody, who do you talk to is rational anymore? How do we even go there? It's going to take somebody starting something. And that's one of the things that we do as chaplains. We go in and we offer these conversations, not just debriefings, but other conversations as well, that bring awareness and say, look, these are the signs and symptoms of critical incident stress. It's a fact. Here they are. They're listed for you. We have a 40-year model that shows you that it works and how to help people through this, and it won't cost you much to do it. It won't. It's going to cost you more if you don't do it, because you're going to lose people by attrition. They're going to leave the job. They're going to commit suicide. Their home lives are going to continue to fall apart. You're going to have survivor guilt. You're going to have all the things that we see during things like this, and we're seeing that in the healthcare industry among doctors and nurses, really, really high right now, as far as some of those abnormal behaviors. We saw them after 9/11 in the first responder groups, and we saw them in cities and people.
Yeah.
And those that were debriefed came away better. Those who were not ended up getting debriefed later because it works. And the broken system requires people who are willing to go and make it whole again. You see what I'm saying? They see the brokenness and they have an answer, and they're able to go and do what they can. It's not going to happen at a national level. It has to start locally, and it has to start with a group of people getting together to say, hey, let's have this discussion among us. And then those people go out and say, hey, to another people group that they're peer with, and say, hey, I just had this discussion over here, and I think it might benefit us if we have this discussion over here. Would you be willing?
Yeah,
You
but
see what I'm saying? And then the next
here's
thing you know,
here's kind of I guess a concern maybe. If you go back through the whole, actually two cases in the past 3 years, go to the January 6th event and the aftermath.
mm-hmm.
Go to
Mm-hmm.
the 3 years um, of COVID. During it, anyone who tries to have an objective discussion as to time out.
Mm-hmm.
We need to step back and let's look at this from a neutral perspective. This person over here is saying yay, and this one's saying nay, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyone that raised their hand and said, hey, time out, let's have this discussion, they got crushed. So
Well,
when you look
yeah.
at mandates that then have a large degree of the cash flow direction into
Mm-hmm.
funding of the medical system, you're going to do this treatment, you will not do this treatment, this treatment, this
Yeah.
treatment, when over here there's a group saying, whoa, time out.
Yeah.
This will work and prevent
Mm-hmm.
hospitalization, right? So now in your community, you want to go out and have a group of 5, then a group of 20. I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like getting good people to get involved in politics. The system is so dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Why would any good man or good woman want to get in that blender or that gauntlet?
Mm-hmm.
Why not stay at home? And you know what? Let's work on our community. This is where our
Right.
children are at. This is where we work at.
Right.
Let's build that community as a model that
Yeah.
maybe then will go up
Yeah.
versus going up and trying to fix it coming down.
Right. I think I think whenever you understand, when people begin to understand the debriefing model that we're talking about, it is a guided conversation that has a specific um, methodology to it. It doesn't get in all those other places, and it helps them deal with this. We're only doing this right now. We'll do that one later if it's necessary. Right now, we're dealing with this. Okay. And so it's a specific guided conversation among a people group over a specific incident. So we're going to say right now, everybody seems to be having trouble with the fact that all the, that I was watching people die on ventilators. I'm a nurse and we were on that floor and we watched their family members not be allowed in and all that other kind of stuff. And it's affected us. So we take that people group and that we're in that particular place and we get them together. We talk about that specific thing. So it doesn't, all the other stuff, it doesn't get muddy. Yeah. It's not muddied up with all the other stuff. We're talking about what happened to you, with you, and around you during that period of time. So that's the guided conversation. It's very specific.
You're untying that knot one strand at a time.
Yes. So you have those events in which they were damaged can over and over and over again during that period of time. And they've never been allowed to vomit that up and say, what that was like for them when somebody, when they knew that family members were dying and they weren't allowed to see they weren't allowed in to say goodbye during that period of time. Or then you take the parents who had their children home from school for 2 years. You take a group of parents and talk about what that was like for them during that period of time, that 2-year period of time, whenever they were trying to struggle between teaching their kids and learning of all of the other stuff that their children was learning, and dealing with the critical incident, the criticalness of that stuff and the stuff. But it's a guided conversation. It goes in a specific way. It is a model discussion that goes in order, and you don't mess with the model, and it works. It helps people come out the other side and deal with the reality of what they went through. And the fact of the matter is it deals with the emotional part too. And that's the key. If we don't deal with the emotional part, then none of us get better. It becomes a litany throughout the rest of our lives of this thing happening to us at that time, and people don't recover unless that is dealt with in a realistic way.
Does that apply to a phrase called PTSD? Debriefing that away?
Everybody after a critical incident, most people, I can't say everybody, most everybody after a critical incident like this, we're a nation that is suffering from post-traumatic stress. Not everybody gets the disorder, the D part.
Yeah.
Everybody, right now, there's a large portion of our community suffering from post-traumatic stress because they were traumatized over the events that happened in the last 3 years and they're not allowed to talk about it. Because all the stuff has been muddied, and whether you vaxxed or you didn't vax, or all that stuff got muddied. But if we were to start having discussions with people who are suffering from PTS, from specific incidents during that period of time, the things that are really bothering them, because there are parts of COVID that didn't bother them, but the things that are, if we can have that discussion among peer groups of the things that happened to us that we didn't get to vomit up or we didn't get to deal with. If we start having those discussions, the next thing you know, people will get free. The next thing you know, people will be rational again, and then they'll start looking around and going, oh no, we need to gain control again, and we need to repair our community, and we need to stand up and put some things back in place, in the right order. But while they're compromised by post-traumatic stress, nobody's rational right now. That's why you're seeing all of this stuff happening the way it's happening. Nobody's rational because they're emotional.
Yeah.
And they don't turn off the 24/7 media cycle.
Exactly. And again, they're being fed and fueled.
Yeah.
Crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis.
But they've lost their ability. It seems like this time. I mean, typically people who are fairly reasonable and can process logic, right? It's like as time goes on, more and more, there's more people sucked into this whole
Yes.
digital world, um, and they're incapable.
Hmm.
They're incapable of.
Yep. They can't hear you.
Yeah, they're like it's like
They can't process. Yeah.
hello,
Because what happens
hello,
is, what happens
okay,
is, yeah, what happens is when you're under critical incident stress, when you're under post-traumatic stress, your rational mind isn't functioning the way that it should.
yeah,
Your other mind, your fight or flight mind, your crisis mind, is basically running the show.
you know,
And basically you're not processing thoughts or everything, so it's impossible for people who are under this type of stress and in this condition to cultivate relationships, loving relationships. It's not possible for them to have a rational conversation beyond the emotion. It's not possible for them to be able to get to a place where they can get a grip without dealing getting that stress off of them first. And this discussion helps them do that. It's not possible for them to be rational.
so I was thinking about this recently. So you see all these PTS,
Mm-hmm.
right? That seems to be growing larger than smaller.
Yes.
And it appears they are not capable of hearing you say, I can't tell you how many times I have said and written of
Mm-hmm.
turn it off, disconnect, psychological psychosis, blah, blah, blah. As time goes forward and events continue to unfold and the crisis around us gets worse and worse and worse,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
this is a whole new group of people around us that
Mm-hmm.
those I'm even seeing this in folks who are in the preparedness,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So it's like, well,
And especially
5%.
since that balloon went over.
Yeah,
Especially since that balloon went over. Yeah. That's in a whole new
it's an
level of
indicator.
crisis. Yeah.
It's like, we keep telling them if it doesn't impact you, turn it off.
Yeah.
If it's going to impact you, you're on fixed income or this or that, it's in your community, your gas prices, your eggs, your food. These are
Mm-hmm.
things you need to be concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's why you have a really good sheriff in your county,
Mm-hmm.
right? To help protect your border of your county. And it's like they want to talk about stories that have nothing to do with
Right.
your local community, your local level, and it's like
Uh-huh.
you can't turn it
That
off. You know?
that's an indicator. Yeah, that's an indicator that they're in crisis mode, that
Yeah,
they're in survival mode, and they're not rational. They're not rationally thinking it through. They're fearful. And that is by design at this point.
yeah,
Now you have this other group of people right now. Okay, so they just cut off the unemployment thing. So you have all these people who are on unemployment for the last 2 years receiving all of these money now coming back to the workforce. Now they've been out of the workforce now for the better part of almost 3 years,
sitting
and now
home
they're coming
watching
back to the
TV.
workforce. Now you're getting these reports out of people that are quiet quitting. We're no longer going to give what we used to give. We're not going to lose our health for our company, and we're not going to see these people quiet quitting. And you see that's another indicator. And as the more I see these things, the more I'm saying this is a critical incident stress issue. This is a PTS issue. If we were debriefing people for on a regular basis in our communities, some of this stuff would begin to wane and go down. But because we're not doing it on large scales or even small scales, you're going to continue to see this type of abnormal behavior and this type of thinking because it becomes rigid. And that's what it's actually called, cognitive rigidity.
Yeah,
It becomes rigid in their thinking. They only see here and they can't entertain enough. So they can't hear you whenever you're saying to them, right now, if they're here and they're in the fearful mode and they're in the cognitive rigidity, they can't hear you. They can't even entertain what you're telling them. They
yeah,
can't even take that on as even a possibility because they can't think it through.
And this goes on for years.
yeah.
It'll go on the rest of their lives if it doesn't get dealt with at some point. So at some point, in a lot of people, PTS turns into D. And not everybody, not it doesn't happen for everybody, because some people are able to get are able by circumstances or by by help get out of the PTS part. But the rest of it is going to be D if it doesn't. You're going to have a large population that go into D because they've isolated, which is another sign that you're not supposed to do when you're under critical incident stress. All the things that you're not supposed to do when you go through something critical are other things that we're doing. We're isolating. We aren't taking care of ourselves. We're not eating. We're not getting outside the way that we should. We're not engaging in normal communications anymore. We're not doing so. All the things on the list of critical incident stress symptoms or stress reactions we're seeing everywhere.
But it's much easier. It's much easier from the big box up here. That's the umbrella over a nation. It's much easier to control and move like a chessboard those that are PTS, right? It's much easier to get them in a group to feed them than it is those that without PTS that are logical processors and that are spread out.
And when you look at the stress, the PTS is compromising. It compromises our ability to think. Yeah. It compromises our ability to feel. It compromises our relationships. It compromises everything. That type of stress, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the whole population compromised by critical incident stress, and they're no longer rationally thinking things through. And again, they become fearful and all these other kind of things, and they behave abnormally, ways that they never behaved before, and that becomes the way. Fear becomes the lens through which they see the world. That's it. Fear becomes the lens through which they see the world, and when that happens, which is where we are right now, everything and anybody becomes an enemy. Yeah, because we're constantly in fight or flight mode. We're constantly in crisis mode. We aren't thinking rationally, friend or foe. We're not even thinking those relationships through. Yeah. So it's very easy for somebody under this type of stress, compromised stress, to look at somebody and say, "You don't agree with me. You must be an enemy. I banish you to the outer realm, and you are never to be talked to again."
There's no neutral. There's no neutral.
No, there's no neutral.
You can't debate and we need to get back have to a discussion. It's one-sided. You offend this person or you offend this person. And it's immediate, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, I don't claim to be an expert in anything, I just know what I'm seeing because this is what it looks like. This is what critical incident stress looks like. This is where I've spent a majority of my career, working with people in this type of stress, from people in disaster or first responders or whatever. As a chaplain, you're dealing with crisis to crisis to crisis, whether it's a death notification or you know what I'm saying? You understand people in crisis, and this is what I teach. I teach this to others and how to recognize it and how to recognize people specifically, those high risk people. But right now, everybody's in a high risk. Everybody's at high risk because we all went through this and nobody healed.
So fear can basically take on a life of its own, and it grows grows the topic way out of proportion to what it really is.
Yes.
So I've been reading a book recently, and the author was talking about shadows. Psalm 23 says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." If you look at a shadow, shadow and light cannot occupy the same space at the same time, and the shadow, depending on the distance from the source of light, the shadow grows exponentially.
Yep.
And so the shadow that down an alley that looks like a menacing guy, when spotlight's shown on it, it's a pile of garbage. Two totally different things. One's harmless, but the fear and the imagination of the shadow made it into something else.
Yes.
And that's what has happened in this world.
Yes.
Satan operates in the shadows. He's the absence of light, and is trying to lead people and manipulate people through shadows of fear.
And they're responding to the shadow as if it's the reality, as if it's the truth. And that's the issue, and it never was true. So the next question you have to ask yourself in the broken system is, who does it benefit? Who does it benefit if people distrust the government? Who's benefited by that?
Government.
Evil in government.
Right? So if you have a large population of people with distrust of the government, and then they're responding as if this and this and this and this and this, then you essentially are hurting them in a direction.
Right.
And because nobody's thinking clearly, and again, right now, compromised by stress, nobody's thinking clearly, nobody's thinking things through. We're being fed all this stuff, all this catastrophic, all this terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. And then you see a balloon from China.
Simple.
And you see the government's response to it. So who does that benefit when the people of the nation respond to that emotionally?
Yeah.
Not to mention what light the balloon is absorbing from something else that's on the table that's happening over here with the left hand.
Right. You get what I'm saying, though? I mean, who's benefiting from all of this fear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because nobody's building anything right now. There is no constructive, artful, or creative growth going on right now.
We're
right?
like a helicopter with no rear rotor.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, yeah, we're just spinning. So if the majority of our populations worldwide are in this state, except for maybe a nation or two whose people aren't being fed these things, whose people are being fed other things that are positive and all these, you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something else going on. We need to start to take a look at that, and we need to be prudent in saying not fear, but constraint. But we need to look at things rationally, and we need to get our brains back. That's what I tell everybody. We need to get our brains back, because our brains are all compromised by stress. And so what we need to do is we need to be able to think, rationalize, think things through. And fear, again, because the majority of the population is seeing everything through the lens of fear, we're not going to accomplish anything positive while that's happening. So if you take the 60-30 rule, the 65-35 rule, then there are about 35% of the people right now that are rational enough to have this conversation with. Yeah. And those are the ones we need to find. And then we can help the 65% once we're able to build, and that's what's going to take. We have to build a coalition of people that are willing to go forward and heal. And that has to be our goal, not to fight the government, not to do this, not to do that, but to heal people. That has to be the focus, and prepare them for whatever's coming.
Correct. They can stand on their own feet.
Right. Yeah. Preparation brings the absence of fear, because you have what you need. It brings security.
Yeah.
And again, we're not teaching a doctrine of we need to overthrow the. That's not where we are. That's not what this is about. We need to make sure that this 35 that we're talking to that are rational understand and have that same understanding. Our goal is not to become, an armed mob of people. Our goal is to become armed with truth and light and healing.
Right.
And once we're able to do that, once we're able to train people to do the healing part, then we're going to get more of that 65% to swing.
Yeah.
And then guess what? Then the 65% becomes the ones who are now back in control of themselves.
And what you're describing here is the most reliable, the longest lasting solution possible.
Yes.
Rebellions, etc., can accomplish something, but the results are typically short-lived.
Right, and there's a whole lot of loss of lives there.
Yeah.
When we've already lost too many, and let's not go in that direction. Let's go and heal. So
right.
if they want to call that a rebellion, that's fine. But I call it healing. Let's go heal some people. Let's go start having these conversations where we can. Let's equip people to do these conversations. It's the only way, the only way to fix a broken system, the only way to fix a broken system is to be the people of faith. that are willing and equipped to go and heal other people, not hold up and be fearful themselves, not hold up and claim, name it and claim it stuff and frame it. We need to be people that are skillful with healing, and not just telling people that they just need to pray harder and you just need to quote this or you just need to that. No, we need to be people who are equipped with the right conversations, in the right spirit, to go and heal people in the right way. And it all came from the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, folks,
it's the only way to fix it, because we're in a system beyond their system.
Yeah. We're just over 1 hour. Time always flies when we get to have these great discussions. Chaplain Elder, where can folks find you and find your work at? What is a good website?
They can go to iaocc.net. And they can reach us there.
Okay. And this is the third segment, and the fourth segment, if I remember correct, will be solutions to the problems and issues that we have been talking about in the previous three segments. We greatly appreciate your time and for you joining us, and hopefully we can do part 4 sooner and get our schedules in line. Festus, thanks for joining with your time as well, because I know you have a busy schedule too. But
really enjoyed it. Always enjoy spending time with you, and always learn a lot. It's a great discussion. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Just I guess digital film never runs out, right? We could just keep recording for hours and hours and hours, and then just cut it into different podcasts. But thank you both so much, and thank you for tuning in to this podcast, YouTubers, and we'll see you again soon. Be blessed. Stay safe.